Is it wrong if you do not want to have kids?
They're back. I talked about Girl Defined a couple months ago. I will link the series below. And I learned that a month ago they made a video about being child-free, so let's get into it. The caption of their video reads, "It's no secret that children are a lot of work, cost a lot of money, and can disrupt one's daily routine. As a result, many modern women are saying no to having babies altogether. Instead, they're opting for a child-free life. Should this trend concern us? Is it wrong to say no to kids? How should we think about this as Christian women?" And before we get into this video, I'd just like to point out to my detractors that you all ask, who cares if you don't have kids? Girl Defined does, and they have a very large audience. So Bethy tells us that she now has a girl and a boy, and people have been telling her, "You're so lucky, now you can stop." And this is something that really annoys me, not for Girl Defined specifically, just about society in general. Maybe I don't understand because I'm one of the terrible child-free people they're talking about, but I don't get why people are so determined or think it's some kind of goal to have one boy and one girl at least. And some people are so gung-ho about that they're willing to bankrupt themselves to try and make it happen, and sometimes it doesn't. Just have as many kids as you want, let them be themselves. Who cares if they're all boys or all girls?
When I tell them we don't know if we can have more, but we would love to have more, they're like, oh wow, okay, and I just find it fascinating, just the culture around having children. And
I recently learned that Kristen and Bethy come from a very well-off family, so perhaps the hardships of money just aren't on their radar. But out here in the real world, Girl Defined, kids are expensive to raise. Aside from the handful of families with 12 children, even if people want to have more kids, they often can't because of financial restrictions. They choose to raise their family comfortably rather than having as many kids as they can. In fact, Kristen and Bethy, some people are only child-free because they can't afford children. We call that child-free by circumstance.
So I want to talk about not how many you should have.
As many as you want.
Is it wrong if you don't want to have any at all?
No.
Is it wrong if you only want to have two?
No.
My struggle has been for so many years infertility, recurrent miscarriage.
I don't mean to sound unfeeling when I say this, but if Christians like Kristen and Bethany believe that God made you perfectly, shouldn't you accept infertility as God's sign that you should not have children? I'm not trying to be snarky. This is just in line with how Christians like Kristen and Bethy interpret these things. But because they want kids, they think it's okay to make changes to God's plan. But also, if God's plan is for you to bankrupt yourself by going through IVF or get terribly depressed because you just suffered 5 miscarriages, that's a pretty shitty plan, God.
The mindset of our culture today, like you said, really is one of if you choose to have kids at all, be sure to only have one or two.
Again, it's because it's the amount that people can afford to have oftentimes. I've seen a lot of parents on this app pre-motherhood who before they had any children wanted a ton of kids, but then once they have one, they realize that one is enough, either mentally or financially. Those people don't love children less because they decided they're one and done. They're just paying attention and they know that they only have the capacity for one child. I love that parents are looking at what is realistic for them rather than just going, oh, we'll figure it out. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised because the last time we talked about Girl Defined, they were interviewing author Candace Waters.
This is crazy. We are living in a culture where it's not like you look at our parents' generation or the generation before that. It was a lot more normal for people to get married young, for people just to accept getting married, growing up. That's part of life, part of the seasons. You have kids, and bigger families were just the norm. But
again, the money situation for Gen X and millennials is much different than it was for boomers. It may have been cheaper to raise a family, and it was definitely cheaper to buy a large house to put your large family in. And of course, many people had large families to, 1, run large businesses such as farms, and 2, because many of your children might die. So if you want even a medium-sized family at the end of the day, you have to have a few extra. Isn't it better that these days the reason a family only has 2 kids is because they chose to have 2 kids, not because 4 out of their 6 children died?
Live in a new era where kids are a take it or leave it. They're viewed as an accessory.
See, I actually think that a lot of parents treat their kids as accessories, or even just as objects that they own but don't like very much. A lot of parents seem to get annoyed that their kid has their own personality and thoughts. You know, Kristen and Bethy, you'll act if your kid comes out as LGBTQ.
They're viewed as a burden, and the mindset has shifted.
For some people. I'm so tired of people acting like the child-free movement is taking over the world. Most people still have children, and most of the child-free community, as I said earlier, are actually child-free by circumstance. These people only don't have kids because of their finances, or their health, or their job. That's what's preventing them from having kids. But Yeah, some of us do see children as a burden. Not children as a whole, but having our own children would be a burden. I don't feel bad saying that a kid would be a burden to me. Like, at least I realized that before I had kids. I think it's pretty nice of me to not have a child that I would see as a burden.
So even if you think like, yeah, I kind of know what I want, I kind of know what I believe, like we need to take a deep dive on this and really challenge our perspectives. Like, are they biblical?
This is classic girl defined. They're fond of saying something like, do you believe that gay is okay? Let's talk about why you think that and why it's wrong. In this case, if you think you're child-free, no you're not, because that's not biblical. Bethy then describes this viral video. It's apparently everywhere, and it's a woman who's dressed really classy, maybe kind of sexy, Bethy's words, and is basically having a sliding doors moment where she's holding a wedding ring, and when it's off of her finger, she has this exciting free life in her immaculate apartment, and then when she puts the ring on, she sees her life as a mother sloppily dressed in a messy room, cleaning up after her kids.
It flashes back and forth between her life now, which is portrayed as very glamorous, so wonderful, so easy, and then her life fast forward if she were to have children specifically, and basically how terrible it is, how exhausting it is, how she's basically losing her life.
Well, Bethy, let me explain to you how the algorithm works. I am a large-ish creator in the child-free community, and I have never seen this viral video. So that tells me that you, Bethy, have been watching and or looking up videos of miserable moms who wish that their lives were something else. And honestly, had I seen that video, I would disapprove of it. Because while the whole like sloppily dressed miserable mom may be true for some moms, it's not true for all of them. I would say most of them. Being a mom doesn't mean you're always going to be miserable, never dress nicely, never have a moment to yourself. In fact, I think that the women who do see motherhood that way and feel that way about their married life are the ones that were forced into it by the kind of rules and laws that Girl Defined supports. If you allow a person to choose whether or not they have kids and how many, they'll probably like their kids and their life a whole lot better than if they were forced into it.
Having kids, it's such a drain. You lose yourself, you lose your life. It's just the worst. It's just really sad to me that is so popular, and that is the message the next generation is handing down.
If the sisters of Girl Defined do not feel that motherhood is a drain, the worst, and that you lose yourself, I'm very happy for them and all of the femme-presenting parents who are able to enjoy parenthood to the max. But it's equally important to let people know before they have kids that parenthood is not all Kodak moments. Millions of people will still be up for parenthood, even when presented with its hardships. They know they can handle it and they don't mind the difficult parts. But why not give people all of the information beforehand so that they can make an informed decision? I say this about religion, and I'll say this about parenthood too. If it's as great as you think it is, it should be able to stand up to all criticism. I think parenthood, and especially motherhood, are still seen as the default, and a lot of people do not put thought into what they're doing.
And what if she does have kids one day? Like, oh, it was just a joke, It's like, wow, like how sad that we view children as such a burden.
First of all, as a child-free person, please stop saying that people who say they don't want kids will eventually have them. But also, the funny thing is, when people, child-free or not, say to a parent who makes a video about how shitty their kid is, or I don't know, they film themselves smacking their kid in the face with an egg, if you tell that parent that maybe the kid won't feel great about it when they come across that video in a decade, we're told, shut up, my kid will know I'm joking, you're too serious. So why wouldn't the same apply to a kid coming across a video of their parents before they were parents talking about how much of a burden they see children as? At least those parents can say something like, oh, well, this was before I was a parent and you guys proved to me that it's 100% perfect all the time. Whereas there are parents who get online and say, oh, my 10-year-old daughter Chrysantheminia is such a bitch. Like, don't you think that's a little more hurtful to come across?
The ball and chain jokes start with marriage, like, oh, ball and chain, like you're gonna be chained for life. Like,
I agree with Girl Defined here that those jokes are gross and problematic. But Kristen and Bethy, those jokes stem from the misogyny pushed by your side of these issues.
what does God say about this? Where is his heart in this?
Ladies, I hate to tell you, but as many verses as there are of God being like, I knew you in the womb or whatever, there are just as many, if not more, verses of God killing babies in the womb, encouraging parents to kill their kids as a prank, and saying that one is blessed if they dash the baby's heads on the rocks. So maybe let's not consult God on children. And then they stop their show for a second to shill a guide on how to stop masturbating. Then they talk about how Christian women and girls want Taylor Swift to get married. I'm not a Swiftie, but I guess Taylor seemed close to marriage with her last beau, and now they're upset that she's single again. I don't get it, like you don't want Taylor to find the right partner for her. I also have heard on this app that Taylor might be bisexual or gay, so I wonder how these alleged Christian fans of Taylor's would react if she started dating or married a woman or a non-binary person. Bethy insists that there are Christian fans of Taylor Swift looking at Taylor and saying, I wish she'd settle down and have a baby so that I can relate more to her music. Now that I'm a mom, we just have less connection. How fucking selfish of you to request that someone you have a parasocial relationship with, she doesn't even know you, have a baby just so you can feel more connected to her.
Definitely does not talk about having kids or wanting to, settle down and start a family, things.
Probably because it's none of your business. Again, why don't you want to take the time to find the right partner? And when do you expect Taylor to talk about this stuff? Because she doesn't know you, so she won't be confiding in you. Do you want a song where she pines for marriage or children? Have you considered perhaps that maybe she just doesn't want those things? Then they say that Taylor is probably indirectly influencing her fans against marriage and children. And to that I say, if you make life decisions based on what a pop star does, you need to learn to think more for yourself.
Our goals have shifted as women just with all these cosmetic surgeries that we have available, the way we view beauty, but even childbearing is viewed as a negative thing oftentimes, which is why surrogates are so popular now.
These women run straight into the point and still miss it. Putting aside child-free people, plenty of women and parents look upon pregnancy negatively because in the Western world, society and a lot of men believe that a person should push out a baby on a Monday and be back to her pre-baby body on Tuesday. If someone does manage to look as they did pre-pregnancy, they're praised. And if they don't, they're labeled as having a mom bod in a negative way. If society allowed childbearing people to just exist in their postpartum body in peace, they probably wouldn't feel the need to get cosmetic surgery. And as far as surrogates go, I don't think your average person can afford a surrogate simply because they don't want to get fat. If fatness is the only thing they're worried about and they can afford a surrogate, they can probably also afford liposuction, a tummy tuck, whatever. I know that gay and lesbian couples use surrogates for obvious reasons, but I'm sure if they could procreate on their own, they would. They mention that a lot of celebrities use surrogates so that they can keep their figure and also continue their career. And again, this is because femme-presenting celebrities are expected to be stick thin. Especially now that they all take Ozempic, it's kind of like, well, if you can afford to be skinny, why wouldn't you be? If I were a celebrity, I also wouldn't want my body pre, during, and post-pregnancy splashed all over the tabloids. Maybe if we just left celebrities alone, they'd feel more comfortable carrying their child in their body.
Even the mindset of I want to have children when I'm ready, and then once I'm ready, I'm going to have them on my schedule, my time. It really is still so selfish, all about me.
What's the problem waiting to have kids until you're ready? In a lot of cases, that means having the finances to make sure you can support a family. That sounds very logical to me. But again, these are the women who literally preach that it costs next to nothing to raise a child. Then they tear into Chelsea Handler, child-free queen.
Her name is Chelsea Handler. Has kind of risen, to the top of mind for a lot of Christian women. A lot of conservatives are talking about her because she's getting out there and really promoting what she's calling the child-free life, and all caps on the free. Child-free. You are free. You don't have to have the burden, the weight, the chains of children.
Christian ladies, it is not Chelsea's fault that she lives rent-free in your head. If what Chelsea is promoting is sticking in your brain, you might want to ask yourself why. The only time I think about parenthood is when I see a particularly out-of-control child. Otherwise, it's not top of my mind, as child-freeness apparently is to these women. Also, to be a pedant, the reason that child-free people choose to use the label child-free rather than childless is not because free is indicative of no responsibilities, tons of money, tons of sleep, though our lives may include that. It's because the label childless is reserved for people who wanted kids but could not have them. The suffix less tends to make people think that you are missing something. You always planned to be childful, but you are not. You are childless. Child-free, on the other hand, is more the mindset of, I can't miss what I never had. And also that we don't spend time thinking about the children we may have had, as a lot of childless people do. Also, I edited a lot of their video out for this video, but they call children a burden so frequently that it was making me uncomfortable.
And she's an older woman. I don't know how old she is, 50s or 60s, and she is promoting this life. And in fact, recently she came out with her own t-shirt.
Not a t-shirt. Why can't Chelsea or anyone else sell a child-free t-shirt? What's the difference between this t-shirt and this t-shirt? Like, Girl Defined sells shirts about how Christian they are. Isn't that promoting something? They literally promoted a book on how to stop masturbating during this episode. Plus, let's not act like people don't ask women about whether they're having kids all the time, so we're just beating them to the punch by wearing it on their shirt.
Okay, I do agree with her on something. As Christian women, becoming a mother, having children is not the most important thing about us. Conservatives have, I think in a lot of cases, made an idol out of motherhood and out of having children, and that's not good.
This is actually a refreshing point of view from Girl Defined. I know that a lot of religious women in general are pressured into marriage, kids, things like that, and it's not a great idea to make those things the be-all, end-all, and these women are an example of that. Kristen is married to a man that she has publicly said she is not attracted to, and Bethy was single for a long time, was desperate to get married and have kids. And Kristen is also infertile, which, as I mentioned before, could be interpreted as a sign from God that you are not meant to have kids. But Kristen saw having kids as something of an end goal, so she adopted 2 boys. What is it about motherhood, or how it's seen in her community, that she had to go shopping for children to make it happen?
Am I less of a woman? Am I not a complete woman if I don't ever have that season of motherhood? Or does God have a purpose and a plan even in this, even if he chooses not to give us children?
Wouldn't the answer be yes? It's been a while since I was a Christian, but I thought God always had a plan. Again, infertility, maybe a sign you should be having kids, and it makes me really sad that a lot of women, Christian or not, feel as if they can't be a real woman without having kids. That's the kind of thought that pushes people who don't want kids to have kids, and that can end really badly. I am being incredibly serious when I tell you that I have been to that funeral.
My ultimate purpose does remain to make disciples.
Well, being a mom is not easy, and if you don't have the mindset of like, it is my job to disciple these children, to love them sacrificially like Christ, children can very quickly feel like a burden. Because
that last statement makes me think of my friend who was raised in a very religious family and who was told by his mother that I love you because God told me to. While I appreciate that treating parenthood as a job might give it more importance in your mind, let's just think about how many people hate their job. The stuff I do outside of my paying job is, for the most part, things that I want to do. I would hate to think of those things as my job. That might take a little bit of enjoyment out of it. And it's like regular old jobs, calling something a job doesn't mean you're going to do it well.
And you have to go into desiring children, I think, from the right place, or it can become very overwhelming. And I don't think in our own strength we are cut out for it.
This is such a weird take. In some ways, I agree. There are people like me who are just not cut out for having kids. But to say that without God, no one is equipped to have children is shitty and allows for a very injurious mindset that I've encountered in a lot of Christianity. The idea that there is a right way to do things as a Christian and any other way is wrong. Someone may say, I've been praying to God to heal my cancer, but I still have it. And the response might be, well, you're not praying hard enough, or you're not praying right. I was personally told that when I was a Christian by another Christian. And the same approach could be taken when a parent says that they've asked God to give them the strength to deal with whatever is going on with their kid, but they're still at their breaking point. It's very likely that a member of their congregation will say to them, you're just not doing it right. Or they could go straight to the root of things and say, you must have had children for the wrong reason, that's why you're struggling.
The modern resistance to having children as though they get in the way and are a pain in the neck is a sign of cultural corruption and selfishness. And so if that is your motive for not having kids, no, you are not obeying Jesus.
Cool. I love the idea of having kids you don't want just to obey Jesus. That won't lead to any trauma at all. And it's just a fact that kids do get in the way of some goals and dreams. Do you know how many parents give up their motorcycle when their kid is born? And many of those parents willingly give up things when their kids are born. And they don't have regrets about giving those things up. But if someone's life goal is to climb to the top of Mount Everest, a lot of parents will not do it because they could die and leave their kids with only one parent. So for many people, having kids means that their dream of summiting Everest has to be abandoned. Their children get in the way of that dream.
I would never commend childlessness the way the world commends childlessness. But there may be kingdom reasons for not having children. So we shouldn't require that of anyone.
Okay, so what counts as a kingdom reason to not have kids? Not infertility, because if that were the case, Kristen would not have children. The only one that I could find, according to the JWs, is being a missionary. And in general, I feel like what could be considered as a kingdom reason is very arbitrary. Some might think that finances are a good enough reason, or or mental or physical health, but other people might not see any of those reasons as a kingdom reason. As I said, I've been to that funeral.
At the same time, he's not God, and he would never go to someone and say, you must have children right now, like that's God's plan for you. So there is some open-handedness of like, okay, Lord, trusting you for each plan for each family, but when it comes down to our hearts, it's our job to make sure our hearts are selfless and open to children.
Again, this is just a wordy way of saying, if you think you're child-free, no you're not, because Jesus.
For God's glory. What we do not have permission to conform either choice to is the culture around us.
Not gonna say the thing about infertility again, but it still holds true here. Parent culture is still a part of culture. And considering that child-free people get told to kill themselves simply because they don't want children, I think that parent culture is a big part of the culture around us. And they talk about hookup culture because for some reason people think that if you're child-free, that also means that you're single and also just want to sleep around.
Sacrificing my time, sacrificing my desires, just like Christ did for the good of others. And that is the opposite message that we will hear in society. Again, we have to be intentionally soaking in these truths, soaking in this gospel perspective, or we will buy into the lies that our singleness, that our mother, our marriage, every season is about our desires, our goals.
The gospel tells me that Jesus never had kids. Wasn't he in his 30s when he died? Shouldn't he have been married with kids by then? By not having kids, I am more like Jesus than any parent.
I was talking to an older couple. They have been married for many decades, and Dave and I actually asked them, we were like, oh, so, what would be your advice for us as a couple? And their advice literally was like, keep having babies.
Yikes. I don't even know what else to say about this, but yikes. Interestingly, I did find a caption on Kristen's Instagram, and Kristen is the one who struggled with infertility and miscarriages and adopted 2 boys. She wrote, "As I live my dream of motherhood, I'm learning a very raw and real lesson about my heart. I am prone to discontentment and disappointment just as much now as I was before kids, which reveals that true happiness, fulfillment, and contentment aren't exclusively found on the other side of prayer. True contentment is making the choice to be grateful." What's that, Kristen? You just kept having babies, but you still had problems? Like a normal human? And that last line really stands out to me. See, when I am really enjoying my life, I don't have to choose to be happy. I just am. Anytime someone says that they are choosing to be happy about their life, I assume that their life sucks.
I want to wrap this whole thing up with some quick bullet points of 5 good reasons to have babies. There are 5 good reasons, she says, to have babies. Number 1, babies are God's blessing. Number 2, babies are a part of God's good design within the covenant of marriage. Number 3, God wants the earth to be full of people. The 4th reason that it's good to have babies is because married couples are called to make babies, disciples of Jesus. We are called to be fruitful and multiply and then to teach them about Jesus. The 5th reason is that heaven will be full of worshipers. When you have children and you train them up to know the Lord.
A little nitpick here, but when they say babies, does the kid have to be an actual baby to count? Because I believe that Kristen's oldest son was at least a toddler when he was adopted. So is he not part of God's plan because he wasn't a baby? Or are they just using baby as a synonym for child? And some of these reasons are just nonsensical. Number 4 is, it's good to have babies because you're supposed to have babies. Just because you fulfilled a duty does not mean that all your problems will be solved, as evidenced in Kristen's Instagram caption. And many times kids put a lot of stress on a relationship that wasn't there before. One or both parents might find out that they actually don't like being a parent. And again, if you tell me you're choosing joy in your marriage, I'm going to assume it's on the rocks.
Make sure that you are both rooted in scripture, that your heart is in line with God's heart when it comes to children, that you're thinking biblical thoughts about this so that as you process, as you pray, you're not coming and approaching this from a worldly, secular perspective.
If you think you're child-free, ask God, because no, you're not. And so ends the most recent foray into the Fundiverse. It was just as painful as ever. But if you find out that Girl Defined is talking about child-free people again, send that garbage my way.